air pollution and health. Gives me immense pleasure to share this dais with two very eminent speakers, Dr. Khilnani and Dr. P. M. Mahesh, whom I will introduce uh, before the presentation starts. But before I really invite both Dr. Khilnani and Dr. Mahesh to share their knowledge and their experience in this very important field of respiratory medicine, I thought I would just set the context rolling for why we are doing this program today. Life starts with the first breath and ends with the last breath. Isn't it fascinating that life is a period defined between your first breath that you take when you're born and the last breath that you leave before you pass away? So life is equated to breathing, and that's how important it is. We breathe around 6 million times in a year, and the whole purpose of breathing is to nourish the body with oxygen. Have you ever imagined or thought about what is pure air? We talk about pure water, we talk about clean, hygienic food, but we rarely give some value or importance to what is pure air. So pure air is a combination of all these different elements that I've put in this uh, table over here that tells you the most important component of the pure air is the oxygen that is so very vital for our survival. However, the air that we breathe today is unfortunately or sadly mixed with a lot of pollutants that are largely generated by human inhabitation on this planet. And these various pollutants include the gaseous ones as well as the particulate matter ones. And together, they they constitute what we call as air pollutants, which have now started becoming a very important reason for poor human health across the planet. The air, as I said, contains oxygen, which we need about 1,000 liters of pure oxygen on a daily basis. It varies from 500 to 1,500 liters. And for this, we need to breathe about 10,000 liters of air on a daily basis. What is most important is this oxygen that we breathe through the air generates 90% of the body's energy, with only 10% coming from the food that we eat and the water that we drink. Unfortunately and very sadly, India is considered to be one of the most polluted countries in the world. 95% or even more people who live in India do so in areas that have air pollution levels above the safety limits recommended by the World Health Organization. And you can see that it's mainly the northern parts of India that have very high levels of air pollution. It is also important to appreciate as doctors that air pollution kills 3 times more people than who die because of HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, or malaria, all put together. And we can see in this graph below that India is the country that has the highest amount of air pollution. We are the world leaders in that, followed by China, then Pakistan, then Nigeria, and so on. So clearly, I think air pollution is something that has now become a very serious issue in our country. We all have seen these images in the news yesterday and today that talk about these flash floods that have happened in the state of Himachal Pradesh and the havoc that it has created. The same floods have been described last couple of days in Delhi. We remember the 2017 Mumbai floods, which were a complete disaster. A lot of people died. And then there are so many areas across the country where drought is becoming more common. So the climate change that is accompanied with the rising levels of air pollution has created a lot of havoc on human health. We actually breathe climate change. So the moment the climate starts changing, we tend to breathe that. And the pollutants that largely come from outdoor sources and indoor sources are responsible for ill health in a very large population. Very interestingly, a survey was conducted amongst members of the American Thoracic Society, to get an insight into the level of knowledge that they have about air pollution, climate change, and respiratory health. And these were all pulmonologists. And you can see in this paper that was recently published in Chest, uh, 31% of the physicians had moderate knowledge, 44% had modest, 18% had completely no knowledge at all about the association between climate change, air pollution, and respiratory health. And in the box to the right of that are the various respiratory disorders that are associated with climate change and increasing levels of air pollution. So it's just not asthma, COPD that we tend to associate air pollution with, but there's a whole host of different respiratory disorders that are associated with air pollution. Now, as doctors, it is not only important for us to be aware about this knowledge, but to apply this knowledge in clinical practice, and more so in helping mitigate the adverse impacts of air pollution on health. There are so many different ways in which a doctor can actually support patients who visit them to minimize the impact of air pollution on human health. And this is a paper that we published a couple of years ago in the European Respiratory Journal. And as doctors, you can see the mitigation strategies, both for household air pollution related effects as well as ambient air pollution related effects. So there is emerging knowledge to tell us what can we do for our patients. Just not merely having knowledge about the association, it is also important for us to do something about it as doctors. Other than this, I think doctors are also responsible for spreading awareness about the impact of air pollution on health among the community. And this Doctors for Clean Air and Climate Action, which is a non-governmental organization based in Delhi, is made up of various groups of doctors from across the country who very passionately have taken up this initiative of educating the lay people about the harmful effects of air pollution, what patients need to do, and as responsible citizens of the country, what we need to do in order to ensure that we start breathing good quality air. Indian Chess Society supports organizations like these because these are purely dedicated for improving the health of our fellow people. So with this very brief introduction, I would like to invite our first speaker for today, Dr. G.C. Khilnani, who clearly requires no introduction in this field of respiratory medicine. Dr. Khilnani has been the professor and head of respiratory medicine at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He is now the consulting physician at one of the private hospitals in Delhi, uh, vice president of the Indian Chess Society, a very, very active academic, and you can see his very knowledgeable posts that he does on a very regular basis for all the members of the Indian Chess Society. He's been instrumental in creating awareness and educating doctors about the COVID-19 pandemic, how doctors need to be educated, what they need to do in order to improve the quality of care of their patients, and so on. Dr. Khilnani has also immense experience in this field of air pollution and health. He's done some original and very crucial research on air pollution, especially ambient air pollution and its impact on health. And we're very fortunate to have him to do the opening talk for today's webinar. And I'm extremely privileged to welcome Dr. Khilnani to share his thoughts and his experience on ambient air pollution and its impact on human health. Dr. Khilnani, all yours, please.
Yeah. So I hope I am audible.
Yes, Dr. Khilnani, you are audible.
So thank you, Sandeep. Sorry, I am calling my first name. Dr. Sandeep Salvi for generous introduction, and thank you, Indian Chess Society, for giving me this opportunity to be before you and present ambient air pollution and its impact on health. And nobody is better than Dr. Sandeep Salvi to emphasize the value of clean air, value of air pollution. My job is to present before you the evidence and what is the impact of air pollution, how does it occur, what are the causes, what can we do, how to do a personal protection, and what is our future? Are we doomed with menace? And that's what. So talking about the burden of chronic respiratory disease before 1950s, chest physicians were
Dr. Khilnani, we
talked
cannot
about.
see your slides. Have you put them?
Yeah, I've shared them. Wait a minute.
No, Dr. Khilnani, we cannot see the slides.
Okay, just a second.
IT team, can you please
I'll,
check?
sorry, I don't know what's wrong. Just a
So whilst Dr. Khilnani uploads his slides,
So you have to give me power, this thing to share. I'm
uh,
unable to share. Take a second, just a second. Can
we
you
can
say?
well, at least we can see some screen, Dr. Khilnani.
Okay, just a second.
Now we can see that you're uploading your slides, and
Yeah, sorry about
yes,
that.
yeah, no
So,
problem.
but I was audible before when I was talking.
Yes, you are audible, Dr. Khilnani.
Huh.
Your slides are visible,
So,
so we'll look forward to your presentation.
yeah, okay, all right. So I will straight away start my presentation thanking Dr. Salvi for a generous introduction, and I'll be discussing in next 25 minutes granted to me about ambient air pollution and its impact on our health. It was actually shocking to see that even chest physicians are not so aware of the adverse effects, and that if the chest physicians who are logged on today get some idea about how air pollution affects our health. I'll be focusing more on respiratory health, but touching upon other organs also. So chest physicians were considered as TB physicians before 1950. Then came asthma, COPD, pneumonia, bronchiectasis, and now came sleep apnea, ILD, pulmonary hypertension, critical care, and several challenging respiratory diseases. And COVID time, we saw further importance of this specialty, where the world realized that respiratory medicine or a pulmonologist, has a great role to play. But these diseases of COPD, asthma, and tuberculosis, and lung cancer, and post-COVID lung disease, this is the most uh, important burden of respiratory diseases that we see. And we all know that there is alarming rise of respiratory disease, especially in developing countries, as Dr. Sandeep has pointed out, that 95% of India is breathing polluted air. And COPD is going to be, or it is actually a second leading cause of death. Lung cancer is number one cancer killer. Very shocking, actually. The number of asthma cases are not decreasing. They are not they should decrease, but it's a genetic disease, and pneumonia is the sixth leading cause of death all over the world. What is disturbing is that India has 18% of the population, whereas 32% of the Delhi's, that is disability adjusted life years, which is a sum of life lost due to death and the disability which occurs in terms of years. The total is called uh, Delhi. So we have 18% of population, whereas 32% of Delhi's are because of the respiratory diseases. And as many as 8.7% of total deaths in India occur due to COPD, and prevalence of COPD increased from 20 by 29% from 1999 to 2016. What is the reason for that? And we always thought that tobacco smoking was related to COPD, which is still true. In Western world, 90% of patients with COPD would be smokers. And it's shocking to know that 50% of the COPD patients in India are caused by air pollution, 25% are because of smoking, and others like mainly occupational, mining, industries, power plants, etc., etc. What is important is that all are preventable. A major cause of morbidity and mortality in our society is preventable provided we take action If I talk about the world, only 10% of the world population is breathing air, which is WHO certified. I'll come to it later. Now, talking about the air pollution, and I would like to recite this phrase by Roderick. Nature's condition, rightly interpreted, reveals a society's culture and traditions as directly as does a novel or a newspaper or a code of law. It is so truly said about air pollution. And I would recite a case of November 10, 2019, that is a Diwali time in Delhi. One dermatologist colleague of mine who was 53 years old, never had any asthma or respiratory illness. He came to my OPD at about 10 o'clock saying, Dr. Kilnani, I got up in the morning and at 4 o'clock I was choking. My mouth was dry. I was unable to breathe. I sat down. I drank water. I opened the windows and I didn't realize what was happening and I was coughing. And what was happening on that particular day, that AQI was 999 and more, because these machines don't measure more than 999, and it was in the hazardous thing. With the result, the daily newspapers are full. Delhi pollution, deaths up by 100% and so on and so forth. And Delhi has a distinction of world's most polluted city. Why we are in this mess? That's what we are going to talk about it. And this is provided by our friend, Professor Arvind Kumar, uh, who operates on lung day in and day out. This is a Himachal lung on a operating table, which is a pink lung. And this is a Delhi lung, which is absolutely charred. Now, this patient is a non-smoker, and no amount of inhalers or antibiotics or any kind of therapy can bring this lung to this stage. So this is what the mess is for us. And if you see the India Gate before Diwali and this is after Diwali, and then next day you see that you can't even see the India Gate. But what we would like India Gate to be like this. Now, this India Gate is at the time when there was a lockdown. There were no vehicles on the road. There were no industries working. You can see the blue sky and clear India Gate. And that's what we would like our air to be. How can we achieve that? That's a question. So going into the history, when did we come to know that air pollution is a problem? This was famous Great London Smog in 1952, when they realized that as many as there were 12,000 excess deaths. They were not deaths, excess deaths over a period. And when they actually investigated it, this was because of the smog. Smog is a combination of air pollution and fog. That is what is called smog. So that's how the story of air pollution came into occurrence. And subsequently, when the unfortunate incident, the World Center uh, 9/11 occurred, there was a dense cloud, and over a period of time, 60 to 70,000 people responded, who were exposed. There were upper respiratory tract infection, there were lower respiratory tract infection, there was asthma, there was reactive airway disease, eosinophilic pneumonia, interstitial lung disease, even granulomatous lymphadenitis, sarcoidosis, and bronchiolitis obliterans. So many diseases were caused by this 9/11 incidents, which actually changed the world, and also the understanding of how our pollution affects us. So the pollution affects us in two ways. That is, an acute way that you see during this World Trade Center disaster, and other thing is the common, that is COPD. So what is air pollution? Now, air pollution is a contamination of air by noxious gases and minute particles of solid and liquid matter in concentration that endanger health. And what is a pollutant? Pollutant is any solid or liquid gaseous substance present in the atmosphere in such a concentration as may be or tend to be injurious to human being or other living creatures or plants or property or environment. So what are the sources? The sources of air pollution are traffic. This is not an unusual thing. Yesterday we had a sort of a floods-like situation in India, and people took hours to reach home because this is a normal situation. There are industries and there are transportation, fuel consumption, industry, and miscellaneous. And in Delhi, we also see periodically this crop burning. Besides this, uncontrolled, unorganized construction work also adds to the air pollution. This brick kiln industry, this person is standing with a mask on, but I don't think he'll be protected. We'll talk about it later. Indoor air pollution, my colleague Dr. Mahesh will be talking about, and in fact, Dr. Sandeep has done amazing research of documenting PM10 of 30,000 microgram per liter in indoor when the windows are closed and the lady is cooking under this fire. So there are six most common pollutants. The particulate matter, I'll come to it later, is the more important: nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, sulfur dioxide. Lead problem is almost sorted out with the lead-free uh, uh, fuel that we are getting. So, what is particulate matter? We all keep listening: PM 2.5, 200, 300, PM10. Initially, PM10 was only measured 2 decades ago. So some of the studies that we conducted said only PM10. So this is all PM are not one. All particulate matters are not one. This is a complex mixture of extremely small particles and liquid droplets made up of a number of compounds, including acids such as nitrates and sulfates, organic chemicals, metals, and soil or dust particles, includes aerosols, smoke, fumes, dust, ash, and pollen. So when we say PM 2.5 in a coal mine would have a different effect. In a construction industry will a different effect. PM 2.5, which is coming from vehicles, diesel will be different, from the kerosene would be different, and so on and so forth. To understand why we talk about PM 2.5 or PM10, this slide is very important to understand. The particles which are more than 10 to 15 micron are not of interest to us because they are actually stopped from entering our respiratory tract by the nasal filters. So therefore, what is interesting is PM particles which are less than 10 micron, that is called PM10. These are silica, aluminum, iron deposits in the tracheobronchial tree. They don't reach the lower part of the respiratory tract. What is important is PM 2.5. These are the most toxic agents. They reach the lowest part of the airways and get deposited there. And that is why today the PM 2.5 is considered the most important. But there is something more which we are not able to measure routinely is the ultrafine particulate matter, that is particle of size of less than 0.1 micron. These are the ones who actually penetrate the alveoli and go into the bloodstream and remain in the bloodstream and will reach brain, kidney, heart, intestine, and everywhere, and are responsible for several effects like atherosclerosis and of course the gases like carbon monoxide will pass through unhindered in the respiratory system. Unfortunately, in the developed world, the air pollution is coming down. Even in some underdeveloped countries, the air pollution is coming down. But in India, the air pollution after 2010, you can see, is going up. Even countries like Bangladesh and some other countries are in China are doing better than us. So we need to wake up with this, and so that we lead a healthier life. So coming to that, what are the health effects of air pollution? And now I might actually scare you a lot. by giving you some data. The health effects of air pollution are the acute effects are in the form of discomfort, such as irritation in the nose, throat, eyes, or skin, or headache, dizziness, and nausea. The respiratory effects are in the form of exacerbation of asthma and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lower respiratory tract infection, lung cancer, ischemic heart disease, and cerebrovascular disease. And it doesn't stop there. As I said, there are ultrafine particulate and gases which go into the blood. They cause nerve damage. They cause uh, there are volatile organic compounds. There's the ozone gas, and all these things will cause headache, fatigue, and CAD. So if you see the pyramids of this air pollution, it causes death in a very small number of patients, but initially it causes lung function decrement. Now, there are several studies done, one done by Dr. Pandey also, almost 3 decades back, when the lung function was measured in Delhi children and also in Tirupati children, school children of similar socioeconomic status. It was distinctly found that Delhi children have a poorer lung function as compared to the Tirupati, and several other studies have been done. So large proportion are affected by in the form of the uh, inflammation, decrement in lung function, and cardiac effects. Lesser are affected with respiratory symptoms like an asthma attacks. There are more doctor visits, school absence, lost work, ER visits, and I'll come to it later, and deaths also. So one should not go only by death. We should actually focus on this, that our quality of life and the quantity of life both are affected. In between, there's no organ in the body is there which is not affected. Now, this is a paper which I was invited to contribute to the current opinion pulmonary medicine, which titled Air Pollution in India and Related Adverse Respiratory Effects, Past, Present, and Future. And me, along with my colleague, Dr. Pawan Tiwari, contributed this. And this had an accompanying editorial also, which said that air pollution in India is the lead article in the issue of COPM, followed by a broad range, and Kilnani and Tiwari take an unblinking view of the causes of air pollution in India. This is a paper which we actually enjoyed writing, reviewing the whole. The salient features were that ambient air pollution attributable deaths are 1.0, that is more than 10 lakhs, and this is 2015. And household air pollution is also similar. This is 2010. And there has been 24% increase in ambient air pollution attributable deaths in last 10 years. There are nearly 6,000 premature deaths per day, and ARP attributable mortality is 27.5%, that is 27 with lower respiratory tract infection and COPD. And household air pollution also causes lung cancer, and that is why we are saying lung cancer in non-tobacco smokers also. So summarizing that Indian data that Lawrence et al. Showed that there is premature deaths in 2012, there is increased respiratory cause of mortality, there is increased exacerbation of COPD and LRTI, that is Mariam and Tobolik et al. There is increased health expenditure, that is quite understandable. But the health effects of air pollution, the history was sort of started with my mentor, Dr. J.N. Pandey, who conducted studies in the late 90s. And what we did that for 1 year, we correlated emergency visits of COPD, asthma, and heart attacks with the level of air pollution. And it was found out that emergency room visits of asthma, COPD, and acute coronary event increased by 21, 24, and 24% respectively. This was a study which stimulated Honorable Court to bring in CNG and also drive away the small scale industry outside 50 kilometers outside Delhi. With that, Delhi's air quality improved significantly, but subsequently the diesel came and it became worse. There was another study conducted by Dr. Uma from Terry, which actually showed that each increase in PM10 by 10 microgram leads to 0.11% increase in daily mortality. And this was actually glaring. This was a retrospective analysis which we published some time back. Now, the adverse health effects don't stop at a living person, but it also affects the fetus in the womb. It affects infant and children adversely as daily children. Today, if I could talk about my experience, 30 years back, we didn't imagine that person would have a nebulization machine at home. If one has to actually talk about it, please buy a procure a nebulization machine. Today, anybody who has children at home, majority of them, if you ask them, do you have a machine? Nebulizer, yes, we have a machine, we use it for our children. So infants and children are affected, pregnant women are affected. There is a incidence of IUGR also, elderly are affected. And children who are born to mothers who are exposed to the large amount of air pollution, the baby's health, also the respiratory health is adversely affected. Now, this does not restrict COPD or asthma or lung cancer, even the tuberculosis, which is another menace with respiratory medicine. Is it a contributor? So this was a study which was done in Korea, which the conclusion was that there is increased risk of infection, including TB, and the air pollution, it was discerned, contributes to that. Now, previously, when I started my career in respiratory medicine, majority of cases with lung cancer were tobacco smokers, except a few who had adenocarcinoma. But now, there is a data from India also that more and more cases of lung cancer seen in non-smoker also. And why it is this? Because the air pollution, combustion of wood, coal and kerosene and diesel contains polyaromatic hydrocarbon, and there is sufficient evidence in animals that it causes lung cancer. Benzene, arsenic acid, nickel also seen to be causing lung cancer. There is sufficient evidence. And acetaldehyde and formaldehyde is also causes. So there is sufficient evidence that lung cancer is caused by. So now, is there a role of severity of COVID and air pollution? We all suffered this pandemic, and we were during COVID time. We were conducting webinars almost every week, talking about everything. But what we realized that pollution impairs the first line of defense of upper airways, and namely cilia, and possibly, and that actually leads to not only increased incidence but the severity of infection. Even in 2003, SARS, 84% more likely to die in area of air pollution. Same we saw in northern Italy also. I'll quickly go through it as my time is coming up. And there was a 1 microgram increase in PM 2.5 was associated with 8% increase in COVID-19 mortality. Another evidence was there from Germany and the other part of Europe when they correlated the mortality with the level of nitric oxide. 83% of all fatalities occurred in region with NO2 above 100, and 1.5% of all fatalities occurred in regions where the NO2 was below 50. That's a direct correlation of air pollution with COVID mortality. So came in 2012, the air quality index that you keep reading. The AQI is 300, AQI is 200. Today the AQI is good. I can go for a walk. So this AQI was 2014 Government of India constituted a committee under chairmanship of Dr. Sharma from IIT Delhi, and I was part of that. And this is based on air pollutants, and it is calculated, and this is a real time which comes on your television or whatever screen. And why it is important? But there is significant correlation of AQI with mortality and also morbidity, and these are the parameters that you know. And whenever it is hazardous, it is advisable not to go out, for a walk or whatever. I'll come to it. Now, minimizing the air pollution is everybody's duty. Administrator, politicians. What doctors can do is sensitize the administrators to make policy, like the one study by Dr. Pandey led to sea change of air quality in India. It led to, in Delhi, the crackers are banned completely, and now on Diwali we don't see any crackers. Similarly, such policies are required. But at a personal level, how do you minimize the exposure to protect yourself in the event of bad air quality? So, are the air purifiers useful? Are the face masks useful? Are the nasal filters useful? I'll be finishing another 3-4 minutes, Dr. Sandeep. So, there are types. There are two types of air purifiers. One are only filters are there, and every air purifier have two parts. One is a filter, another is an adsorbitant. Adsorbitant is the one which absorbs the gases, soluble gases. So, how to use air purifier? That air purifier should be on all the time that you are inside. Place the purifier in the room where you spend most time. Leave your air purifier in the same room. Keep the doors and window closed. That's very important. And the point of flow should be towards you, and avoid ionic air cleaners, and periodically clean the filters. Now there's some hazards also of air purifier. There's ozone production, which itself is a pollutant. But although the health benefit has not been documented, but the common sense says that if the PM 2.5 goes down or the air quality improves, so my personal take is that it should be recommended for people who have respiratory diseases, especially in the time of high air pollution. There was a small study was conducted in Delhi which said that although the most affordable air purifiers currently available are associated with significant improvement in indoor air pollution, they are not a replacement for public action regions like Delhi. Now, these are the kind of air purifiers which are available. So, the face mask. WHO, of which I am one of the members of their global health program, they don't recommend that. They call it respirator. They don't advise face mask or any kind of mask which will protect us from air pollution. But I did contest with them that you are talking about PM 2.5 of 25 and 50, and we are talking about 200. So masks should be of some use. But it should be understood the simple cloth mask which we were promoting during the time of COVID has no value in protecting from air pollution. N95 or KN95 may be of some value in protecting us from air pollution. But nobody should think that if you are wearing a mask, you are completely protected from adverse effects of air pollution. So therefore, finally, should we go for a morning walk in the polluted when the pollution rate is high? That's a big question asked to us. And during when we do for exercise, our mouth opens, our tidal volume increases, our minute volume increases. So therefore, the more air, quantum of air goes inside. And there is evidence from the UK study when the people were made to walk on the Hyde Park, and later on they were made to walk in the Oxford Street. Walking on the Oxford Street reduced their FEV1, and also some cytokines were liberated. I have no time to go into the detail of that, but suffices the fact that Walking when the AQI is hazardous or very poor does not give any benefit. I always advise my on television or whatever that early morning walking when there is a smoke, uh, one should not go out for a walk. It will cause more harm than good. So final slide is there have been several efforts to mitigate the Air Preventive and Control Pollution Act came in 1981. National Air Quality Monitoring Program started. Environment Protection Act, a post-Bhopal tragedy was enacted. Motor Vehicle Act came to limit the automobile emission. Supreme Court verdict for CNG adoption by public transport buses. This came after Dr. Pandey's study. Bharat emission norms have been there. AQI was initiated, and now the Ujjwala Yojana. And India has signed the Paris Accord also. And there's a graded response action plan in Delhi NCR to to control the air pollution and the construction stops. And there were several things were tried, odd even it did not work. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll conclude by saying that this brief presentation, I have given an overview of what causes air pollution and how we are affected, how can we protect ourselves. Our future depends upon the quality of air, which Dr. Sandeep Salvi emphasized. If we doctors have a duty to educate our patients, educate, and the researchers like Sandeep Salvi is doing a great work in publishing and also emphasizing on the policy makers to improve our air quality by bringing out very stringent. I was hearing Mr. Gadkari, the Honorable Minister for Transport, and he expects that by 2030, 50% vehicles in India will be electric vehicles. That's a silver lining to my mind. But indoor air pollution is a big menace. Dr. Mahesh will be talking. With that, I thank Indian Chess Society and Dr. Sandeep Salvi for patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Khilnani, sir, for an absolutely brilliant overview of what is air pollution, who are the people who are most vulnerable to it, what are the impacts of air pollution on health, and more importantly, the mitigation strategies. I think the last part of your presentation has some very useful and practical tips for doctors to apply that knowledge in their clinical practice. So thank you, Dr. Khilnani. We will come to some questions at the after Dr. Mahesh's presentation in the panel discussion. It now gives me a great privilege to introduce and invite Professor P.M. Mahesh to deliver his talk on household air pollution and its impact on human health. Like Dr. Khilnani, Dr. Mahesh does not require any introduction. He is the professor and head of the Department of Pulmonary Medicine at the JSS Medical College in Mysuru. He is ranked in the top 2% of the respiratory scientists in the world, according to the latest Stanford University ranking. So very proud of Dr. Mahesh. Apart from being a very good academic and a clinician, he's a very good researcher. He's a quiet type, but does some absolutely amazing research in this field of respiratory medicine. And his original work in the field of household air pollution is also absolutely brilliant. So may I now invite Dr. Mahesh to tell us about the next very important topic on household air pollution and its impact on health. Dr. Mahesh, all yours, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep, for the kind introduction. And I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, we can. We can see your slides. We can hear you well, Mahesh.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandeep. And thank you, Dr. Khilnani. That was a brilliant talk. Now, I will spend some time to look at what are the various aspects of indoor air pollution. This is the beautiful Mysore Palace. In the rains, it looks even more beautiful. So I will be looking at what is indoor air quality, what are the common indoor pollutants, where can they come from, what are the possible health effects, what are the hidden pollutants in LMICs, where I will borrow heavily from Sandeep's work, And we'll discuss some of the studies that we have been doing for the last 17 years in the Mudra cohort from Mysore, and how to maintain good indoor air quality. A good portion of it has already been covered by Professor Kilnani, so I will just rush through that last part. So when we talk of indoor air quality, it is part of a much larger indoor environmental quality. And when we talk of an indoor air quality, it is just one part of the whole indoor environmental quality. And all of them have a significant bearing on promoting health and disease. Now, when we talk of an indoor air quality, people in the developed countries spend almost about 90% of their time indoors. So the exposure to indoor air pollution cannot not only have negative impacts on the health, the productivity, but also health problems. 6 to 9% drop of the office work performance as seen in some countries. In India, this was a very old study. The health burden in terms of sick days attributable to indoor air pollution was estimated to be 1.6 to 2 billion days in a year. So you can imagine the impact of the poor indoor air quality. Now, this can lead to a lot of symptoms and diseases. Some of these are non-specific. Some of these can really be problematic. Low birth weight, just like you have heard Professor Kilnani, the impact of the outdoor air pollution, these again extends from womb to tomb. The low birth weight, perinatal mortality, asthma, COPD, otitis, tuberculosis, cancers, cardiovascular diseases. It spreads across the spectrum. They have found carbon particles in the brain. So I'm sure the cognition, we have done some studies that shows that people exposed to biomass particles, the cognition also is poor. Now, we have indoor air pollutants, whether the person is economically in the higher status or lower status. If you talk of the rich homes, you have paints, varnishes, plywood, particle boards. In a new house, at least up to 6 months, the concentrations are very high, up to 6 months. ACs, if they are poorly maintained, cosmetics, detergents, house dust mites, of course, if there are a lot of carpets and curtains. In a poor homes, mainly it's the biomass fuel exposure. This has been our major focus over the last 17 years. Agricultural product storage, especially tobacco, is the worst of the lot. And of course, if they use kerosene stoves, they contribute as well. Now we have several sources, starting from the bathroom where we have fungi, odors, and microbial pathogens. You have AC units. You have living room, which includes VOCs, and the carpets having dust mites. Outdoor air comes indoor. A lot of the times you find that the outdoor air pollution also contributes to the indoor air pollution. And once it comes indoors, it doesn't easily get out. And therefore, the indoor concentration is actually worse than the outdoor concentration. So starting from the kitchen to the laundry room to bedroom, they can be everywhere. I won't have time to go into all the details of it, but sufficient to know that these are some of the key indoor air pollutants, like the environmental tobacco smoke, the carbon monoxide, the nitrogen oxides, organic chemicals, pesticides, formaldehydes. These are the main sources, including dry cleaning clothing, moth repellents, air fresheners, cleaning agents, aerosol spray, solvents, glues, herbicides, lawn and garden products, plywoods and particle board. And of course, we all know what are all the various diseases that can be caused by these indoor air pollutants. You have the inhaled particles, including asbestos are there. Radon mainly comes from the soil under the building, some of the earth-derived construction materials, some of the groundwater. That's a very high risk of lung cancer. You need to have a radon certificate in the Western world when somebody wants to sell their house. Biological organisms are also critical air pollutants. The lead comes from the paints. So there are a lot of indoor air pollutants that we need to be careful of. Now, the hidden pollutants, these mainly come from Sandeep Salvi's seminal work, where he said the mosquito coil has a lot of harmful products. Most of them use it every night. They have forgotten the use of mosquito net. If at all it has to be used, he has shown that the window open, door open is the best way to go. If at all it has to be used, but preferably it should never be used. Same thing with the dhoop and the And the incense sticks, those are extremely toxic. Almost, you can see the PM10, PM2.5 that comes. It's like about 1,000 cigarettes. And they are also very, very important hidden pollutant that people don't know. They think they are being religious. Again, this is from the Sandeep Salvi's paper. If you look at the number of people exposed to the indoor air pollution with the solid fuel users, they are about 3 billion compared to about 1 billion cigarette smokers. This is again that looks at the burden of the chronic respiratory diseases. You'll find that the household air pollution, both in men and women, is right there among with smoking and the ambient air pollution in causing COPD. Now, especially the NO2, the TRAP, the PAH, these are critical. And the TRAP is known to cause the cough, bronchospasm, and lung inflammation, especially neutrophilic inflammation. The spectrum of health effects of indoor air pollution extends from an impaired lung function, so very similar to the outdoor air pollution that Professor Kilani has shown you, to restricted activity, absenteeism to work and school, need for more medication use, to premature mortality. I will quickly go through some of the studies and the work that we have been doing over the last 17 years. This is one of few rural respiratory cohorts in Asia with a follow-up of more than 15 years. We wanted to have a long-standing cohort to look at COPD in rural men and women. We want to find out what is the minimum threshold of biomass exposure that increases the risk of respiratory disease. We all know about minimum 10 pack years needed to cause respiratory disease in tobacco smokers. But what is the minimum threshold for biomass exposure? We didn't know. And what about the decline in lung function over time? And to see if there is any specific cytokine signatures between tobacco smoke and biomass, how are they different? So this is where we are in Mysore. Out of the 7 taluks, we randomly selected 2 taluks. I would like to remember Professor Prabhakar. He was in ICMR. He was a Deputy Director General of ICMR, came to Mysore after he retired. And he helped us set up this cohort with the design. And we had about 160 villages each of the taluk. We selected about 8 each. This is the flow chart. I won't go into the details. Just that we screened about 9,000 people to get about 8,500 people in the first phase of the study. I won't go into the details. We have a large amount of data. We followed the BOLD protocol, and we have tremendous data over the last 17 years. We have been following them up, wherein we did lung functions, we have done mental health, we have done vitamin D in a subsegment, we have done serum antioxidant reserves, we have done 40 serum cytokines and chemokines in a subsample of these. And these are some of the key findings. One is to find out what is the minimum biomass exposure that can cause respiratory disease. The biomass exposure index was originally coined by Professor Behra from PGI in about 1990 or 1991 in this paper in Chest, which is like your smoking index that looks at if a woman cooks for 4 hours a day for 15 years, then her biomass index is 60. But is it clinically relevant? That is what we aim to find out. So you find that as the biomass index increases, definitely the log odds of having respiratory disease, definitely there is a dose response curve, and definitely there is an increase. So we observed that a biomass index of above 60, when it's adjusted for passive smoking, age, dusty occupation, had a significant risk of chronic respiratory disease when the biomass index is above 60. And then it gradually increased with the increased dose. But the highest sensitivity and specificity was with the biomass index of around 100. That's the minimum exposure needed to cause respiratory disease. Maybe 100 is when you have a very high risk of having disease. Interestingly, we found that people from Nanjangud and Mysore, there was a big difference in these women in their sensitivity. For example, if you have biomass in exposure of above 60, 1 in 85 women would develop chronic bronchitis, whereas it was 1 in 28 women who developed chronic bronchitis in the Nanjangud taluk. If you come to the biomass index of 110, 1 in 47 in Mysore would develop chronic bronchitis, whereas it was 1 in 13. So we were wondering for a long time what was the difference. And Nanjangud has a lot of industries. One of our PhD students currently went through all the villages in the Nanjangud and found that there is it's a very high mining area, magnesite, bauxite, and these directly comes to these villages. The wind flow, they monitored all the wind flow and found that definitely the village in Nanjangud, which had the highest prevalence of chronic bronchitis and COPD, is just next to the mining area. For the last 40 years, they have been mining in that area, and that is probably the main reason. So out of these 4,000 women, we have now taken about close to 1,400 women exposed to biomass, urban women exposed to LPG, and we have been doing again a series of spirometry. We have done pheno in this population, and we observed that in the biomass women having COPD versus biomass women not having COPD, you will find possibly there is a difference in their ventilation status. Chimneys, windows, size of the windows are probably important. If you look at the PM 2.5, when they have COPD at 30 minutes, at 45 minutes, they have much higher PM 2.5 concentration than the non-COPD group. The same thing is true when you want to look at a 2-hour PM 2.5 versus a 12-hour PM 2.5 average. You still find houses with COPD have much larger PM 2.5. We have also done with the IIT Madras, we have been looking at the composition of these, and we find when you look at the elemental carbon and the organic carbon, we find the organic carbon is similar, but the elemental carbon has a big difference between houses where women have COPD versus where they don't. And this could be important as well. We have looked at the various metals, elemental composition of this PM 2.5, and compared them between the houses with COPD and normal. Some of them show a dramatic difference between the two groups. We have collected these biomass fuel particles. We also looked at the VOCs from this biomass fuel burning in houses with and without. This is COPD, and this is houses without COPD. And we have done the gas spectroscopy, liquid LCMS, and we have found there is a significant difference between the two houses. Now, we have done about 30 subjects so far, but our aim is to do about 250. Whether biomass affects the lung parenchyma, if so, by how much? We all know that unlike tobacco smoking, biomass predominantly affects the medium size, small and small airways, and tobacco smoking has significant impact on the emphysema. But when we looked at CT findings and put them into a software called InBio, we find that biomass COPD also affects the lung parenchyma, I think, as much as tobacco smoking. We have subjects with greater hyperlucency. These are the various textures: hyperlucency, ground glass, reticular, honeycombing. This is the lung core in the central area, and this is the peripheral area. And the software tells us what proportion of these textures are available that are normal and that are diseased. And we found out of these 30 cases where we have done the CT scan and looked at the software, we have subjects with greater hyperlucency, we have subjects with greater ground glass suggesting alveolitis, we have greater reticulate pattern suggesting interstitial involvement. We also have even more with greater honeycombing in some of these patients. Once we finish, I think 250 patients, we will have our subjects. We will have a lot more clarity on this. Now, if you look at, we found two main phenotypes. We did pheno for all the 1,400 subjects. We found subjects with high pheno as well as normal pheno. How are they different from one another? If you look at the total lung volume from the CT scan, people with high pheno had greater total lung volume. People with high pheno had greater hyperlucency and greater honeycombing. Whereas people with normal pheno but COPD had greater pulmonary vascular volume, greater reticulation, and greater ground glass. So these two seem to be distinct phenotypes, COPD with normal pheno as well as high pheno. If you look at, we have done lung function on two occasions. 2009 was the first wherein we screened all the 1,400. Now, when they come for CT scan in 250 of the subgroup, we have again repeated. Definitely, there is over a period of 4 years, the decline in lung functions is greater in COPD subjects with normal FeNO as compared to COPD subjects with high FeNO. So when we also look at the phenotype, are these stable? Are they going to shift over time? Over 4 years, people with high FeNO actually had higher FeNO. There was hardly any shift. People with normal FeNO were people with normal FeNO. This is 2019 and 2023. So it's a fairly stable phenotype that you see over time. Now we need to find out who are the people who are at risk. Not everybody develop. We have had women who are 100 years old, cooking for 90 years, and lung function is 120% predicted. So not everyone develops disease. We need to identify who is at risk. This is one of our papers where we believe CC16 is a very good biomarker. We had about 200 subjects, and CC16 was low, both in tobacco smoking as well as biomass COPD. And it correlates extremely well with 6-minute walk test, with the gold grading, with the dyspnea, with the CAT score, quality of life, and mortality indicators as well. So this was where we looked at 40 cytokines, looking at biomass COPD as well as tobacco COPD, and we found that CCL27 is an important cytokine that was lower. CXCL13 is also lower. Again, it is important for the immune regulation. 15 of these found significant difference between biomass and as well as tobacco smoking COPD. We also did personal samplers, wherein women had to wear it for about 48 hours. We collaborated with Yale University for this. And Mysore was one of the sites. They did it in several other places as well. And there's a lot of difference when women wear personal samplers. If you find in India, we have predominantly naphthalene and phthalates actually that come from plastic. And these are from the different countries where they use biomass fuel. So biomass exposures from the womb to the tomb, it has systemic effects on almost all the organs in the body. So it's important that we look at maintaining good indoor air quality. I'll quickly go through, as Dr. Kilani has already spent a good amount of time on this. Natural ventilation in a country like India, where electricity is expensive to come by, natural ventilation is a good option. HVAC is good. You have plants for indoor air purification, and then you have the air purifiers as well. So natural ventilation is important. Carbon dioxide, if you keep the room closed all the time, the windows and door closed all the time, CO2 and CO buildup will cause a lot of sick building syndrome kind of symptoms. So what about schools located near traffic bearing highways? When you open windows all the time, there is a high indoor concentration of these traffic generated air pollutants. So what is called as manual airing strategy is crucial, which means depending on the pollution, you can just open the windows for 5 to 20 minutes per hour, both door and windows. And this reduces the indoor generated pollutants, the VOCs and radon. But at the same time, the indoor ultrafine particles, which increases by longer window opening time, is reduced when you keep it very short. For even 5 minutes per hour, if you can do that, you will be able to reduce the indoor air pollutants. Now, HVAC is important. So the filter, we need something called as minimum efficiency reporting value, and minimum of MRV 13 is needed. If it is 6 to 7, the black carbon is reduced by about 31 to 66%. But if you go to 16, you can go up to 97% reduction. So that is the kind of filter that should be used when you're talking of air pollution. If you look at green screens for building, now this is a Hedera helix, it's about 2.2 meters. It has reduced the indoor particulate matter by about 44% in traffic dense area. So these are some of the things that can be used. We have a whole lot of indoor plants that can absorb the VOCs, such as formaldehyde, benzene, and trichloroethylene. They have varying capacity for the removal efficiency. Maybe a combination of these plants could be ideal. So the types of air purifier has already been dealt with by Professor Kilani. It is important that these all have a good removal in a sort of efficiency, but the most important one, you should not use an ozone and ionic charge, because they themselves can cause a lot of diseases. Especially the ionic charge is known to cause cardiac events. So when it is used, indoor air purifier, you can find that the PM 2.5 is reduced, lung function is improved in an asthmatic, FeNO is reduced, so it is good. But if you use an ionizer air purifier, before it was 12, it becomes almost 13,000. So though the PM 2.5, 10 are reduced, the increase in ions, negative ions, can cause a lot of autonomic dysfunction in cardiac, especially in susceptible people, and that can actually cause a lot of issues. So it is important that those kind of only filter-based must be used with an MERV more than 13, ideally 16. So these are all the available option. You have the behavioral interventions, you have the clean fuel in school buses, school commute, maybe carpooling, use green infrastructure. Inside the classroom, you need to do ventilation, both windows as well as the door is important. Use high efficiency filters, air purifiers, indoor plants, all can be used with a fairly decent removal efficiency for both the particulate matter as well as the gaseous pollutants. So the air purifiers can effectively remove PM 10 and 2.5 by up to 34 to 57%. HVAC is good. Clean fuel policy is good. Green barriers can help PM 10, 2.5, NO2, and the combination are likely to be the best. So whatever COPD diseases we are seeing now is due to the indoor air pollution for the last 2 or 3 decades. The current exposures will have their effect another 2 or 3 decades later. So it is very, very important that the Ujjwala scheme is good. We have been following, when we revisited these 4,000 women, 1/3 of them had switched completely to LPG, 1/3 were still using completely biomass fuels, and 1/3 stacked use of both. Thank you very much. I finished within time, Sandeep.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh, for an absolutely brilliant overview of indoor air pollution. You very rightly used the word indoor air pollution. When I introduced your topic, I introduced it as household air pollution. But then I completely realized that I think household air pollution was the earlier term that was used because of the belief that it was the house that was the predominant source of indoor air pollution. But now we know that even schools and offices, other indoor spaces are also contributing significantly to air pollution. So I think that was a big learning for me. Thank you, Dr. Mahesh, for that. So let's come to the panel discussion, and I have a few questions that I have already jotted down for both these speakers. I think both of you all have given an absolutely amazing overview, with Dr. Mahesh actually showcasing all the original wonderful work that he has been doing in Mysuru on household air pollution. I think that is absolutely top-class research, Mahesh. You know, with all the cytokines and the very large number of studies, large number of patients that you have included into your studies. So these are landmark events in the story of indoor air pollution and health coming from India. So very, very nice to hear all that. Dr. Khildani, coming to you with the first question. And towards the end, you mentioned about the introduction of the electric vehicles in India, and the silver lining that you talked about, which suggests that if the fuel-driven vehicles are they go down and the electrical driven vehicles go up, the ambient air pollution levels will come down, and that will have an impact on health. Do you really see that happening? I mean, do you believe that electric vehicles will have a big impact on ambient air pollution levels? And what about the requirement for electricity to do the recharging of the vehicles? Somebody has to generate some pollution somewhere to generate the electricity. So are there pros and cons for the use of electrical vehicles and ambient air pollution?
So everything has pro and cons in this. There's nothing which comes without a cost. So for the electrical vehicles, there are issues of disposal of used batteries and all, which America is also facing. But if you talk about air pollution, whether it's 26% or 40% comes from the vehicles, everything boils down to the emission. Now, who knows more than you that 100 years back, California had a similar air pollution what India has now. They had traffic snarls, and over a period of 70 to 100 years, that their air pollution, their number of vehicles have gone up 10 times, their air pollution has gone down 10 times. This is only because of the good engine quality and good fuel quality. So India did start working on that. The CNG came, then especially in Delhi, the 15 years old cars were put off the road, but the implementation was a problem. The odd even did not work. The fuel quality has improved, but what has actually reversed is the mushrooming of diesel vehicles, which have actually they have become bigger vehicles, very big vehicles. People are fond of SUVs. In Delhi now, we don't see smaller vehicles as compared to other cities. So I can talk more about Delhi because of my experience. But now, as of now, 12 to 13% of vehicles in Delhi have already become electric.
Wow.
So
I think
that's
that's a good
actually,
sign. That's a good sign. At
yeah,
least people
that's
are
a
getting
good
aware
sign.
about
Yeah.
the
There's a big thing which is coming from government of India is generating solar electricity, which is very, very economical, and people are adopting to that. You don't need any infrastructure for that except the rooftop. तो हम अगर हिंदी में बोले तो आवश्यकता आविष्कार की जर्नी होती. When you have a car, you find
so
electric
well said. So well said, Dr.
points also. If you will keep thinking about it, कि अरे बिजली का पॉइंट कहाँ से आएगा, ये कहाँ से आएगा, वो कहाँ से आएगा, तो फिर प्रॉब्लम शुरू ही नहीं होगी. What is important and true, if we can address the car makers and the government, unfortunately, the only single point which is hindrance is the electrical vehicles are much more expensive than the usual vehicles, which is actually unfair, because if you want to improve the air quality, another thing that what United States did was that so many offices and government offices, they made charging free. They don't charge for that electricity. And as I understand, running an electric vehicle of moderate size or small size in India also costs 1 to 2 rupees per kilometer. That's really a very big saving. But somebody who wants to buy a car has to spend more money. So government is already doing this. And another thing which United Kingdom has done, that there is a zero duty when you buy electric car as compared to the usual vehicle. So a lot of incentives are being given, and as you have more vehicles, more charging points will come. It's not a big deal, to have a charging point in your own house or parking lots and all those things. There has to be a beginning. So Delhi has actually taken a lead in that also, and especially two-wheelers and four-wheelers both, and now three-wheelers also are becoming electrical. I don't see any other solution, because the fuel, you improve the fuel quality, marginally you would improve the air quality. But if you make all the cars, imagine a situation that all the cars become electrical. We'll be cruising on as far as the city air pollution is concerned. Another thing is that industries, as far as Delhi is concerned, the court had to come in. So what is our job? Our job is to do such kind of programs at a different levels and apprise the honorable court and the government. Unfortunately, a lot of decisions come from the court of law these days.
Very
So you and me have to, and people like us have to raise our voice. And I think I'm Actually, my hand's off to Mahesh, who is doing so much of basic research. It's not easy to do it, and I am really very, very impressed. Uh,
Yes.
so, some kind of research should be done what Dr. Pandey did. And sorry, I'll take only 1 minute to talk about my mentor, Dr. Pandey. That way back in early 90s, we actually erected a big pole in the rooftop of All India Institute, and actually put up a motor and used to pass the air through a filter
Oh,
and weigh it before and after to measure the PM10. And that whole machine costed only something like 2,000 or 1,000 rupees. So that was the innovation Dr. Pandey had. He had that vision. So more data has to be generated to impress upon people the impact air pollution, and resource control is the important thing. Thank you.
very well said, Dr. Killani. I think one of the key messages that you put forward was the fact that the government is taking active steps to do something about it. So whether it be ambient air pollution through reducing the taxes on electric vehicles, uh, replacing the diesel buses in Delhi with CNG, minimizing the levels of air pollution emitted by industries. I think there's a lot of work that is happening, but still, of course, we have a long way to go. In the space of indoor air pollution, the Ujjwala Yojana scheme, I think Mahesh is a very important initiative. And before I come to that, what is the real benefit of the Ujjwala Yojana scheme? What impact do you think it must have created in terms of numbers of people who are developing COPD, in terms of the suffering that is associated with COPD? So I'll come to that. But before that, you mentioned about the biomass index of more than 60. I think this is your original work, very commendable, and as I said, very proud of what you're doing. Now, could you simplify this in terms of how many hours per day is equal to biomass index of more than 60? So just like how we have pack years for cigarette. So
And
if you
smoke.
smoke 20 cigarettes a day for 1 year, it's one pack year. Uh,
Correct.
how many hours of exposure to biomass fuel uh, is equal to maybe 10 pack years? Do you have those numbers?
Equivalent to smoking, I do not have, but you can take it like a minimum tobacco smoking exposure is 10 pack years.
Correct.
Minimum dose here to cause disease is about 60. So you
Yes.
may take that as fairly to be an equivalent. Though
Okay.
we have not actually, measured the damage. Maybe, now there are 3D lung models. They can actually test. They have actually done it for e-cigarettes. Kaustubh Ganguly from Sweden has actually done it for e-cigarettes. They're also now doing for biomass. So let us see how e-cigarettes correlates with biomass. But actual tobacco smoking and comparison with biomass in humans, I don't think it has been done yet.
Okay. But what is 60? What does 60 actually mean? How many hours per day?
Like, for example, if a woman cooks for 3 hours a day for 20 years, that's a biomass index of 60.
Okay.
For 4 hours a day for 15 years, that's a biomass index of 60. So that's the minimum dose and duration of exposure that is needed to cause respiratory disease.
Very good. I think these are very, very new figures for me as well. And when we take a good history from these patients, I think we should start noting down the biomass index, which Dr. Mahesh has very, very beautifully, developed for India. Now coming to the Ujjwala Yojana scheme, do you genuinely believe that the Ujjwala Yojana scheme has been a great success especially in the rural population, in terms of reducing the harmful effects that it has on women's health?
Correct. I mean, in the 4,000 women, like I said, after the Ujjwala scheme, pre-COVID, we had actually visited all the 4,000 women that were there in our Mudra cohort originally to see how many had shifted. Ujjwala scheme was already there for a couple of years. And we realized only 1/3 of them had shifted purely to LPG. And 1/3 of them were still purely with biomass, mainly because their husband prefers the slowly cooked food, or the mother-in-law.
Very true. There are behavioral issues here involved.
Issues here which cannot be controlled. And 1/3 were stacked on. For some cooking, they used gas, and for some cooking, they used biomass.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
Manthan had shifted completely, but the impact of this on COPD will be in the next 2 decades.
Okay.
We'll not be able to see it now. We will
Correct.
still continue to see COPD because the minimum dose is like 15 to 20 years, as we talked about the biomass index.
Correct,
So the,
Mahesh. But in India, we see a lot of young girls helping their mother in cooking. So they are exposed at a very young age. So
absolutely.
15 years for them is when they become 20, 25 years old.
Absolutely. There, I think you will find a lot of benefit. And we still don't know, like, for example, for cigarette smoking, to have no effect on mortality, the person has to stop smoking before the age of 30.
Correct. Yeah.
Beyond that, they still lose a part of their life. This is from the Framingham study. We have
Yes.
no idea what it is for the biomass index.
Okay. Okay.
It
I
is-
have a very interesting question for both of you.
Yeah, sure.
And this relates to the ventilation patterns inside the house and the impact it has on indoor air pollution levels. So what Mahesh is saying is have good ventilation, let all the smoke that is being generated inside the kitchen go out, and therefore you will benefit from that. Dr. Khilnani, on the other hand, if you're living in a city like Delhi, where you open the windows, you're going to get all the horrible pollution that is coming from the motor vehicles and the industries and other sources. So, good ventilation, how do you really define it in terms of in a rural population and in an urban population? So, Mahesh, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. See, in a rural village, like for example, where I am working, people are still farming, people are using cycles. Rarely you will not see any car or any bus. You have to travel 3-4 kilometers, walk to catch the bus. So they are in a very pristine environment, I should say. So there you open the windows, you have no issues. The problem you say comes in urban slums.
Correct.
In
Yeah.
slums, there is a problem because they are in the heart of the city. You have extreme outdoor air pollution. And when they open the windows, they have a lot of problem. I think here, having plants, we showed about the green, these ivy and indoor plants, these are possibly they can get it at low cost, or if somebody can help them out or the government can help them out with these plants, maybe they can form that as a screen. And it is shown how that can reduce. So they can have open the windows, but just outside they have the screen of these ivy that can help reduce the outdoor pollutants from coming in. I mean, this is just a thought.
Yeah, good, very, very good thought. Dr. Khilnani, your comments on opening the windows in Delhi city and improving your ventilation inside the house.
I would like to share something, personal experience, if you permit me. Way back in 90s, soon after the Kargil war, I went to Kargil with a team of doctors and had a sort of called health mela. The Kargil, yeah, of course, it was a great height and very cold. By 10 o'clock in the night, that electricity goes off in the Kargil at that time. So the people in Kargil were solely dependent on heating their rooms with non-electrical means, that is burning of biomass fuel. And to keep the room heated, they would close, of course, the windows have to be closed. And I realized that 100% people had COPD. I realized in those 2 days, we did PFTs, we did a lot of tuberculosis and also. So the question that you are asking, I don't have a clear-cut answer. First and foremost, it is not possible to close the window. Let us accept it. In Delhi or even northern India, how can you close the window unless you have an air conditioning system? And it is well known that patients who have asthma or COPD, they are advised to be in air conditioned environment and not the open window when the air quality or AQI is bad. But if you talk about the general population, it is not practicable. It is important and majority of the middle class or lower middle class socio-economically, they don't have proper windows to close it also. There would be some kind of opening there. But having said that, my thinking would be that when the AQI is hazardous, and then I don't need to recite 300 or 240 or whatever. That time it is better to close the window.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's an important answer. We have just about 2 to 3 minutes, and I want very quick answers. I have 2, 3 questions, very interesting questions. Dr. Khilnani, you talked about these sources of ambient air pollution, and we are generally led to believe that our neighboring places are the ones from where the sources of air pollution come. But you showed that one image of the burning of, crop residues, and all the pollution from, say, for example, from Punjab, Haryana, comes to Delhi traveling several hundred kilometers. So does air pollution really travel such long distances? And for Mahesh, indoor air pollution generated from the house when you have a chimney and you have, does that air pollution travel long distances and have impacts on other areas? Dr. Khilnani first.
So one line answer is that it travels much more than what you are talking about. That's what my thinking is. Of course, now if I could talk about science, the ultrafine particulate matter does not travel beyond 300 meters. That is the evidence. So why I'm telling you that people who have houses close to the trains or close to the roadside, close to the flyovers, they would be affected. The policemen will be affected with ultrafine particulate matter, but if ultrafine, not the particulate. But if the person is living 300 meters beyond that, for that person, that ultrafine particulate hazard is not there. So as far as the traversing of pollution is concerned, it is not only from Delhi to Haryana to Delhi. That's the political question. Punjab to Delhi. It goes much beyond that. Of course, the distance matters. Closer proximity, the effect is much more. It would go much beyond 200 kilometers also. Depends upon the wind quality and climate and all those things.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Khilnani. Mahesh?
I think when the chimney is used and you have a cluster of houses all cooking at the same time, we have found that the outdoor air pollution also increases. It's not as much as the indoor, but definitely there is a doubling or even quadrupling in some situations. We have done the measurements when women are cooking, both indoors as well as outdoors, and it can reach increased concentration as well.
Okay. The last question.
So I just want to add that it's
Yes,
a
sir.
well-known fact that you cannot segregate indoor from outdoor air pollution, because indoor air pollution always contributes to outdoor pollution also, and vice versa.
Correct. Absolutely right. Last question, for both of you all. You're seeing a patient in a clinic, and the patient is living next to a busy road. He's got a shop over there, and so he's got no other choice but to get exposed to the pollution that is emitted from so many sources. The question that the patient asks you is, Doctor, is there any magic tablet that will help me protect from the harmful effects of air pollutants? Do you have an answer for that? Mahesh, you first, and then Dr. Khilnani.
we have looked at some of the, not a tablet, for example, but there are studies in South Africa wherein they have used certain plants that includes moringa, and that has shown increased urinary excretion of the pollutants. So there are factors in the diet, and we have been looking at some factors, because I said women 100 years old, 120% lung function, very fit and active, they eat a handful of moringa leaves every day raw. I said, what do you do? That's so some of the messages we have got from women. We are actually studying them in more detail in 3D lung models. Let us see what we get. But there are nutritious substances naturally available that can increase excretion of the absorbed pollutants.
What about the role of antioxidants with your fruits and vegetables and so on?
I mean, they are good, but I don't think they are completely effective in mitigating the aspect or the a lot of health effects of these pollutants. They're simply not potent enough.
Okay, Dr. Khilnani, your last word.
So I would put it what Mahesh is saying, that 100 years old. We get people when we ask them to quit smoking. They will say, see, my uncle smoked till the age of 96. He never had any cough. So that is well known. There are genetic factors. Of course, the fruits and everything is good for general health, but it doesn't protect you from COPD. and I don't know any tablet. I am actually a physician who is very much against polypharmacy. I never say ये vitamin लो तो बचोगे. Even COVID time, I never gave vitamin C to my patient because ultimately everything came out to be farce. Same I would think true of what Dr. Mahesh is saying about some plants that has unless there is a scientific basis, we should not propagate it because it create a false sense of security, which we should not instill instead of preventing emission of pollution or
I fully agree with
preventing
that.
exposure.
But there are hidden secrets that Mahesh has at least has observed in his research, which merits further research. I think that's
No,
what.
I'm not saying anything against what Mahesh is saying. I am giving my view on antioxidants. I am giving on view of my ignorance about knowing any tablet which can reduce the harmful effects. At
Okay.
least I
Okay.
don't know that.
Okay. I think on that note, we would come to the end of this wonderful symposium on air
Thank you so
pollution and
much.
health. We have listened to some of the best talks you could hear on ambient air pollution and its impact on health, as well as indoor air pollution and its impact on health. Two brilliant talks, and the panel discussion was also very lively and exciting with very, very interesting answers. So, with this, I would then conclude with today's wonderful Indian Chess Society webinar on air pollution and health. Do continue to join us on a regular basis as and when the Indian Chess Society has these webinars. Uh, we try our best to organize topics that are very important and relevant from a clinical practice point of view. And we also ensure that we get some of the best speakers that we have in this field. So with that, I would like to say thank you and like to invite Ms. Datta to do the vote of thanks, and then we can say thank you very much and good night. Ms. Datta, are you there? Okay, if not, let me take the pleasure of saying thank you. Thank you, Professor
Thank you.
Kilnani.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank
Ganesh,
you. Thank you.
for
Thank
your
you very much.
wonderful contribution to this.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Dr.
Cheers.
Salvi, for being here and holding the program together like this. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule. I would also like to thank our faculties, Dr. Khilnani and Dr. Mahesh, for being here with us in this ICS endeavor. And we really hope to meet you soon for another webinar imparting more knowledge to all our audience and viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
As for
Good
our
night.
audience,
Thank you.
I would like to thank you for joining us. You can contact us at icsofficeexecutive@gmail.com. Please join in large numbers and interact with our faculties, post questions for them, ask them, interact with them. And before closing this webinar, I would like to tell you all once again, remind you that NAPCON Delhi registrations of 2023 are now live. So please get yourself registered as soon as possible. Can we please have the NAPCON video display? Thank you so much for displaying that. So as you all saw, 5th to 8th October, please register yourselves now and we will see you in NAPCON. Thank you so much yet again for joining us and we will see you in in the next ICS webinar. Thank you.